Today on the podcast, we're talking about what you need to know before you go into the recording studio so you can maximize your time, get the best productivity, and get the best results. We'll see you guys on the inside. What's going on, guys? This is Mike from the Songwriter's Planner. You are listening to the Songwriter's Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I always try to make time to say thank you at the beginning of this podcast for everybody who comes and listens to it. I know that you are very busy out there. There's a lot of things going on. So the time that you spend here, thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for joining me today. Today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about going into the recording studio and a few things that you should know before you go into the studio so that you're not wasting money and you're not wasting time. Because going into the recording studio is all about time versus money, and that's basically what it comes down to. You have a limited amount of time and you have a limited amount of money. I'm guessing if you're like me, you have a limited budget for everything. So you want to make sure that you maximize the amount of time you have in there with the amount of money that you have for the best price that you can get. And I know that we're talking about going into the recording studio and things happen, things on the fly pop up, and you can have creative moments and stuff. And that's just stuff that just happens. It's going to happen no matter what. But before you go into the recording studio, you can kind of come up with a game plan on what you want to get done, how long you want it to take. So you have kind of a schedule that you can follow. So today we're going to be talking about some tips that you can use before you go into the studio to make sure that you're better prepared to be in there, to get the most productivity and be efficient, be creative, and get the best product out there, okay? That's what we're talking about today on the podcast. If you're watching this video, you may notice that I have changed up my backdrop. I'm now in my studio. I just kind of wanted to switch it up. I'm in a standing format, so this is new to me. But hopefully this will provoke more thought for me. I don't know. We'll see. We'll try it out. But if you're listening on podcast, then ignore what I just said. Everything is the same. All right? Okay, cool. Okay, so recording studio, guys. At some point or another, you are going to enter a recording situation. It happens for all of us, whether you're going into a friend's recording studio, whether you're going into a mansion of a recording studio. It doesn't matter. All of these tips we're talking about today can still apply to no matter what you're doing. Unless you're recording yourself, which I always am a big advocate for, being able to record yourself. You can pretty much take as much time as you want. You don't have to worry about time or money. You have your own recording studio. That's awesome. Good for you. But if you are going into a situation where you are paying someone to record your music, you definitely want to make sure that you have everything down, or at least all these tips we're going to talk about today. You want to make sure you at least check them off and say, yes, I've done doing this, because it's all about you're spending your own money. Okay, you're spending your money to get your music recorded, and you don't want to waste time in there. It's super important that you take the time to think about what you want to do, what you want to achieve in the studio before you go in there. And the more you can think about and accomplish up front, the better it's going to be, the better of an experience it's going to be in the studio once you get in there and you get your music recorded, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Why don't we jump right into it? We're going to go through a couple tips here, okay? Tip number 1, make sure you choose your songs. Choose the songs that are your strongest, that you feel the most comfortable with playing, that you have not recorded yet, or, you want to get good recordings of. Choose the right songs. You may have 50 songs in your songbook, but obviously you're not going to go in and record all 50 at once. Choose the ones that are going to be the most effective for you. Again, remember, you're paying for this, so you want to make sure that you at least choose the songs that you really, really feel strongly about recording. Whether it be 2, 3, 4, 5 songs, doesn't matter. Just make sure you choose the ones that are your strongest, that you feel the most confident about, because once you get into the studio, you're going to have to know what's going on. You're going to have to know. There's no, trying to figure out, what songs am I going to record? You got to know when you're going in what you're going to do, okay? So make sure that you know which songs you're going to record. Pick them out first. And that leads us next to tip number 2, which is make sure, and this is probably the most important tip, make sure you do the appropriate amount of pre-production work on the songs you have chosen. Okay, now let's talk about what is pre-production. Well, pre-production, depending on what kind of an artist you are, if you're an acoustic act or if you do electronic music, whatever, it doesn't matter. Pre-production is all about getting all the bugs wired out, getting them all ironed out before you go into the studio, getting all your formats of the songs nailed down, and basically going through with a fine-tooth comb out of all the songs you can record and making sure that you have them all smoothed out. Is that a word? Smoothed out. Make sure that you have everything figured out, because once you go into the studio, if you are not solid on one of your songs, or if you're still debating whether you should put the verse here or the verse should go longer, or should you put the bridge here, how long should the solo be? These are all things that you need to hammer out before you go into the studio, because once you go in there, if you're still deciding these things, you're paying for this time. This is money that's coming out of your pocket. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have your songs all figured out, at least formatted out solid, so that you don't have to worry about writing the song as you go into the studio. Okay, it's super important that you get that figured out. That's what pre-production is. It's going through all of your songs, making sure you have them, all the problems decided, what's going to happen. Everybody knows their parts. Everybody is well rehearsed. Everybody knows when the changes come in, when the guitar solos come in, when all your lyrics are written. Everything is done. That's what pre-production is. I would suggest to spend a considerable amount of time doing pre-production work, because it's so important. Because when you get in the studio, you're not wasting the engineer's time, you're not wasting the producer's time, you're not wasting your bandmates' time. It's so important to get this done. So pre-production work, spend a lot of time on doing that. If you're a band, I would say at least a month before you go into the studio, depending on how often you rehearse, go in and start rehearsing those songs every time you guys practice. Work out all the parts, work out individually as players, work out your parts so that you know them when you get in there. And then collectively, make sure everybody knows the songs. It's really, really important to get that down, okay? So pre-production, super, super important. I really wanted to stress that tip, because it will save you a lot of time and a lot of headache when you get in the studio. And stress levels go up when you are burning money and you cannot figure out how your song is going to go. So make sure you get all that done ahead of time. All right, guys? So pre-production work. The next tip, let's talk about equipment. Make sure that you have all the equipment ready that you're going to be using in the studio. This means guitar amps, guitars, basses. For drummers, make sure you got all new heads. Well, that can get expensive. Make sure you don't have any broken drum heads or anything like that. Make sure none of your equipment is broken, because when you get into the studio, you want to make sure everything is working and functioning properly. Sometimes some studios, depending on which ones you go to, have gear that you can use there, and that's totally cool. That's always an option. A lot of recording studios are fully equipped, and a lot of times they'll let musicians use the gear that they have in the studio, because that's easier for them to record this stuff because they're very familiar with it. But this doesn't take out of the fact that you should have your own instruments and your own equipment ready to go, because you don't want to be dealing with technical difficulties again while you're in the studio. This is a get in and get out situation for the most part, depending on your budget. And you don't want to be bogged down by technical difficulties that you're having with your equipment. Can't get the amp turned on. Your effects pedals aren't working. You need 9-volt batteries. Whatever you do, go actually make a checklist. Go through and make a checklist before time and go, okay, I'm going to need this. I'm going to need guitar cables. I'm going to need some new drum heads. Going to need, whatever it is that you're going to need. Make a checklist ahead of time and make sure that you have everything ready and picked up, loaded, and ready to go once you get into the studio. So gear, super important. Okay, guys. So another tip that I wanted to cover here is making sure that before you go into the studio, you're communicating with each other. You're communicating with your band members. You're communicating with your collaborators. You're communicating with the people who own the recording studio. You're communicating with the engineer. You can never have too much communication. And the reason I say that is because you don't want to go into the studio and have a surprise and say something like, the engineer or the studio owner says, "Oh, by the way, we got to use a different room for drums," or we don't have this microphone available, or something surprising comes up where one of your band members forgets that, you have to record today. That's happened before. Like you just got to over communicate. Basically what you want to do is you want to avoid having any surprises pop up on the time that you go into this recording studio. Anything that may surprise you that could hinder the actual recording process. So, and the way you get around that is to communicate with each other, talk to each other, talk to your band members, make sure everybody's on the same page about when the studio time starts, when does load-in start, where to bring your equipment, what equipment you should bring, what equipment you need to have on deck. Talk to the engineer, ask them if he needs anything of you. Talk to the owner of the studio, ask them if you need to bring anything. Just over communicate with everybody at least a couple weeks, 2 weeks out, so that you are completely aware of what's going on and everybody's on the same page. I'm telling you, you cannot communicate enough because, again, it comes down to time is money in there. You don't want any surprises. You don't want anything to pop up and be like, "Oh my God, I can't." That'll either make you spend money or it'll stop you from recording that day. Whatever the process is, you can just try to make sure you have as much down as possible. Okay. Ooh, choking up there. So that is another tip. Just make sure you communicate with as many people as you can and over communicate. Like I said, super, super important. Another tip, once you get into the studio, when you're in there and things are set up, you've done a couple takes, you've done some warm-ups, everybody's kind of getting loose, getting familiar. I would say make sure that you are patient with the process. I know, I keep stressing that time is money in there, but you have to be patient because recording music takes time. It takes time because not just setting up. Once you get there, you got to set up and get everything ready. That takes time. You got to warm up. That's going to take time. You got to get sound levels. That's going to take time. You got to get all these things set up. And you have to be patient because if you're not patient and you start getting stressed out about, "Oh my God, I'm paying for this time. Why isn't this going faster?" All you're going to do is stress everybody out, and you're going to stress the engineer out. You're going to stress the producer out. These people that you're going in to record with, if you've chosen the studio and you've done your research, then you know who's running the studio and you know what you know the people that you're working with. You've talked to them before. They know what they're doing. They know this is their studio. They know how everything is set up. You have to put your trust in the people that own the studio, that they are going to set you up and get you the best levels, the best quality, the best everything, because it's their studio. And in order for you to let them do their job, you have to be patient with the process and make sure that you're capable of sitting back and going, "Okay, they're going to start miking up some drums. It's going to take a little while. Just let them do their thing." Going into the studio is an exciting thing. It's an exciting time, but it can also be very stressful. So I just want to make sure, and I wanted to stress to you that having patience with the process and trusting the people who work at the studio to set you up and make sure that you're all good to go when it's time to record is super important, because you don't want to stress everybody out. And you certainly don't want to stress yourself out because you're going in there to have fun, record your art, and just have it be a delightful experience. So be patient when you get into the studio and make sure that you check everything off your list and that everybody's cool, okay? Because you don't want to heavy shoulders when you're walking in there and you're trying to record music and you're just stressing out, okay? So be patient. Along with being patient, I will stress this: be swift. And what I mean by that is, if something needs to get done, if you got to get a guitar amp out of a room, go do it. Boom, go do it. If you got to switch some drums around, go do it. Get on it. Again, you can be patient and you can be swift in the studio. And if you can do those things, you will have a much pleasurable recording experience. don't be afraid to help out. If the engineer needs some help with something, help them out. If you ask for help, even if it means going to the store and getting everybody some Gatorade or something like that, like anything you can do to help the process, be patient, be swift, be helpful. It's going to make the recording experience much more pleasurable for you and everybody that's in there. So remember those things: patience, be swift, be helpful, and you'll have a great time in there, I promise. I mean, I've recorded many, many times, and the sessions that always go well are the ones where everybody's relaxed, there's no pressure, everybody's on deck, everybody's on time, and everybody knows what the final target is, okay? So that is the next tip. The last tip I want to talk about kind of goes hand in hand with the one I just talked about, is that make sure that you're nice. I know it sounds funny, but just make sure that you're super, super nice to everybody. Make sure that you can work with people, because going into the studio is a full-on working situation. You're going to work with people in there, and you want to make sure that you are all on the same team, okay? Because if you're not, and you have tension in the studio, it doesn't make for a good time, and it can affect your music, it can affect your performance. Not only that, but if the people who are there recording you aren't enjoying your company, then they're not going to put their time, they're not going to put their best foot forward for you. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to make this guy sound great. They're going to be like, oh God, this guy is such a pain in the ass. Why, I just want this session to be over already. Just make sure that you're nice when you go in there, because everybody's trying to achieve the same thing, which is a great recording. And if you can work with your collaborators, your bandmates, and you guys are all chilling out, you guys are having a good time, and everybody's nice, and you're working with the engineers and the producers, and everybody's cool, it just makes for a better experience. And, there was recording sessions where I'll go in and, sit down, and maybe even the guy who's miking up my drums, he may not be the engineer. I'll just talk to him, say, hey, how's it going, man? How's your day? Yeah, oh, man, thanks for setting up that mic, ask him questions about the microphone. Just do all these things to just kind of make the process much smoother and much more fun to do. It'll make a better recording experience for you. Not only that, but the people that work at the recording studio, they work with everybody. They have people come through their doors all the time. So they now that they know you and their experience with you, they're going to talk about with other people how it was to work with you. And you want to have a good experience there so that they can say, oh yeah, this so-and-so, this artist was a pleasure to work with. It's all a word of mouth, and word of mouth travels fast in this industry. So if you can get a good experience at the recording studio and get a good repertoire with the people that own it and the people that recorded you, hey, that's better for you. That's going to work for you down the line. So just wanted to talk about those things. Those are my recording tips as you're going into the recording studio. Just wanted to go over these things with you on today's podcast and my new setup here. And just hopefully you get some value out of these things we talked about today. Like I said, time is money when you're going in there, and you just want to make sure you have everything as much as you can figured out, nailed down, and worked out. And on top of that, it's a pleasurable experience for everybody. Okay, guys. So thanks for joining me today on this podcast. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next episode. And hopefully, I'll probably talk about studio stuff again. Maybe we'll do another version 2. But for today, thanks for joining me today. I'll see you guys on the next podcast. Peace and love.